Well, I'm not going to tell you about the origin of anything. I'm going to tell you about it. I should kind of list the descent of creationism, because that's really what I'm going to talk about. I want to give you a little bit of a history of modern creationist thought, where it all came from. And the message I want to get across to you is that if they are telling you that you have to believe in this particular, peculiar version of origins in order to be a good Christian, they are lying to you. Because this is a recent innovation. The stuff that you may have heard at the Answers in Genesis conference last year is something very, very modern, very recent, not at all like the founders of modern American Christianity actually thought it should be, let alone this Jesus guy or whoever you think was behind it. So what I want to do is I'll just first run you through a little bit of the history of modern creationism, and then what I will do is what I love most to do is I will tear it apart. That'll be the fun part. I'll cut that short though. I could go on all night shredding creation. But just think of it being a reasonable time. Okay, first thing. You may have heard of this. James Ussher's chronology, the primate of Ireland in the 17th century, made an effort to work out the age of the earth. And I'm going to surprise some of you by saying, I actually kind of respect what he did here. This was a reasonable approach. They didn't have a lot of geological information at that time. They didn't have the scientific framework that we now have to work with. So Ussher sat down and he used his sources, and that source was the Bible. He said, okay, well, if we read the Bible and we assume that this is a very literal translation of events in the past, can we reconstruct our history? And he came up with these numbers. And you can see there, this is from an advertisement I received a while back. That the earth was created in 4004 BC, that there were these kings described in Genesis. You can line those up and they sort of fit into that model. The actual dates were not derived, as many people think so, from adding up the ages of the patriarchs. This is actually numerology. That James Ussher knew, historically, that Jesus was born in 4 BC. You suddenly see why it's 4004 BC? He thought that there are 7 1,000-year periods in the history of the earth. And that's how he's trending backwards, and he fits the data to that particular model and says, okay, well, we will create 4004 BC. And of course, if you add this all up, if you take the correspondence to the 7 days of Genesis, the earth was supposed to end in 1996. It didn't. Okay, but anyway, this is a reasonable approach for the 17th century. It's using available data. And I fully approve of a scientific approach that tries to take whatever data you've got and make reasonable, limited conclusions from it. Of course, it's going to have to be revised in order to fit more data as time comes by. And unfortunately, this one has not. Like I said, I got this in an ad. I actually got this from an ad from WorldNet Daily. They are selling posters illustrating Ussher's chronology. And notice what they say about it, that it's an accurate reference. Yes, they're trying to argue the earth actually is 6,000 years old. They literally say this fact. The earth is only around 6,000 years old. This is not true. All available scientific evidence shows that's completely bogus. There's even historical written documentation that shows no, the earth is much older than that. Well, these people were much older than that. And they use this to claim that the church has been backsliding into deceptive areas of evolution. What a terrible thing for the church to do. Well, this was, as I said, this is the 17th century. It was kind of state of the art at that time. Geologists did progress over the time, and what happened in the next few centuries is something very interesting. There was a growing conflict between the scientific evidence, between what geology was saying, and what the old school Christians were saying. And what you find in this period of a couple of centuries is a lot of honest effort by Christians to reconcile their ideas with the scientific evidence. So yeah, this was going on for a long time. It wasn't that they were automatically rejecting everything that was said. It was the Christians, there were good scientists who were Christians who were sitting there thinking about this. How can I fit my Bible that I believe in to the obvious, clear, irrefutable evidence of the rock? Now, some people had other ideas. I mean, one of the most prominent ones here is William Paley, who in about 1803 published his book, Natural Theology, which was extremely influential. It was one of Charles Darwin's favorite books. He loved this thing because what it was is, for the time, nowadays it sounds a little quaint, but for the time, this was very well written. It was, I've actually got a copy of it in my office. I've read it myself. As long as you can get over that old British style, 19th century British style, it's not bad. It's a good story. He marshals a lot of anecdotal evidence in support of his belief. He's most famous for this little scenario here where he says, what if you were crossing a heath and you found a stone? And you ask, how did that stone come to be there? Well, you'd say, okay, it's been there forever, or, erosion produced it, whatever. You'd say something natural to it. But then if you got a watch, what would you do? Well, then you'd say, well, obviously, it had to have been built by somebody. Now, he's going to make the argument in his book that the reason you make that argument is because it's really complicated. That there's a lot of parts to it. That's not actually the reason why you would say the watch is manufactured, right? It's because you have experience with watches. You know how watches are made, at least approximately. It's not because it's really complicated. If that were the rationale behind it, then you would have to say, well, if I fish my hook on a rabbit, the rabbit is much, much more complicated than the watch, right? So you'd obviously have to say the rabbit has been designed instead of being produced naturally by mommy and daddy rabbits. We won't get into that today, but yes, you would not argue it's been manufactured. Unfortunately, this idea still persists. This is the basis of intelligent design creationism, where they still argue, yes, the things are really complicated. That means the only way they could have been produced is by artifice. It could not have been produced naturally. Now, this argument, though, I have to say was refuted pretty quickly. This is one of the most beautiful statements against it that I've seen. What it is, it says, okay, design must be proved before a designer can be inferred. The matter in controversy is the existence of the design universe, and is not permitted to assume the contested premises and then infer the matter in dispute. Insidiously to employ the words contrivance, design, and adaptation before these circumstances are made apparent in the universe, then justly inferring a contriver is a popular sophism against which it behooves us to be watchful. Basically saying, okay, yeah, you can say it looks designed, but that's not proof that it's designed. That's the question. Is it designed? And just throwing in words like contrivance and design, so forth, doesn't resolve the matter. You need evidence in order to do this. The nice thing about this, Paley published 1803. Anybody recognize who wrote this?
Percy Shelley.
Percy Shelley, 1814. Yes, a romantic poet was smart enough to figure out what a theologian got wrong, and was right there in the mainstream of scientific thought at the time, and what we still think scientifically. So, yeah, Percy Shelley, smart guy, he figured this all out. And by the way, I recommend this book. This is a marvelous book to read. It's wonderfully clear and logical, and he just nicely dices and slices all these arguments from Paley and other people and takes them apart very thoroughly. Now, the thing is that, what we've got here is a guy making this argument. Okay, so William Paley is saying the exquisite contrivances of a parent's life could not have arisen without the guidance of an intelligent creator. This is a peculiar statement for a scientist today. Of course, he's not a scientist, he's a theologian, but we'll grant him, okay, he's a smart guy, and he's thinking about these things. That's a plus. That's his argument. That's the argument that's still made. I gave a version of this talk elsewhere. There was a professor at this place, Roger Christensen, in 2009, who said basically the same thing. People who believe in intelligent science, the complexity of life is too great to come about by naturalistic forces. Notice that this is a statement of ignorance. We don't understand how it arose. It's too complicated to arise by natural processes. It's too difficult to imagine how this could possibly work. Now, there's this guy that comes along in 1859 and publishes his book, Charles Darwin. And this is, I'm really boiling the argument down to the bare minimum here. He says, wait, we can see numerous gradations give rise to complex and perfect organisms by natural mechanisms with no need for guidance. In his book, he uses the example of the eye. He describes how that evolved step by step by going to nature and looking at the organisms there and finding all these intermediate forms, all these successful intermediate forms. What this is a difference in approach. So the creationist Paley is saying, I can't imagine how it happened. The scientist Darwin is saying, look, here's how it happened. And I'll tell you right now, the two scientists, that second approach is far more convincing than the first one. Just saying you don't understand something is not evidence of the answer you're trying to provide. Okay, so what happened though? This is a very peculiar thing. That, as I said, at this time, people were thinking about these, and I'm not trying to be mean to William Paley. He's actually a smart guy. He's doing his best to address these issues. He's going to be refuted by Shelley and Darwin and everyone else, but he's taking an honest approach to this. In the United States, we did something very peculiar. We went through this peculiar transformation of creationist thought. Instead of trying to reconcile their religious beliefs with the scientific evidence, American creationists took a different approach and rejected science, which leads to the current uncomfortable situation that we're in. So what I want to do is give you a little pocket history of American creationism. I'm listing a few important figures up there. And that's because this is a process that creationists are completely unaware of. It's kind of shocking to be completely ignorant of the intellectual foundations of your beliefs, but they are. If they thought about this, they would be shocked. If they knew about this, they'd be horrified. Because, as I said, early on, these scientists, the creationists, were all working together and trying to reconcile religion and science. What happened is, at the end of the 19th century, there were a number of religious movements that took place. And I'm just going to mention one. You may have heard of them, the Seventh-day Adventists. Seventh-day Adventists were a radical movement. They were a brand new version of Christianity. They had a number of views that mainstream Christians found extremely objectionable. They were regarded much like Scientologists would be nowadays, as weirdos, strange people. In particular, one of their doctrines was very offensive to mainstream Christians, and that was they believed in modern prophets. In particular, Ellen White was their prophet. And she would have visions, and these visions were written down and described, and they had almost the force of biblical accounts. They would be regarded as seriously as what you found in the Bible. Now, Ellen White had a vision once. She dreamed that she went back in time, escorted by an angel, and that God, Jesus, same guy, I guess, and God gave her a private viewing of the events of creation. And she came back with this detailed account that was written straight out of Genesis, and she said it was exactly like this. It was precisely 6 days. Each day was 24 hours long. It was created in exactly the same order as the book of Genesis. Now, other Christians at the time were not accepting this. Most Christians at the time had a more allegorical view of Genesis. They could see it as pretty poetry, that the most common interpretation at that time was, okay, the book of Genesis is a story, it's an allegory to teach you about obedience and teach you about respecting God and to teach you to honor the laws, that kind of thing. That's what it wasn't a kind of story. It's not a literal account. Ellen White says, no, it is literal. It's absolutely true. 3 words happen exactly as it's described there. Now, she dies in about 1915, but she has an acolyte George McCready Price, who turned out to be extremely influential. Price is a Seventh-day Adventist. He firmly believes everything that Ellen White said. He's also got some training in geology. Now, unfortunately, he's a Seventh-day Adventist, and I can tell you right now, if you read the history of these guys, everyone thought George McCready Price was a wacky kook with a weird cult-like belief, and rejected him out of hand. At the time, these two were busy spreading the word in their own version. There's a couple of books that came out. I put 2 stars there to indicate them. And some of you more well-educated Christians may be aware of these: the Schofield Reference Bible and the Fundamentals. Anybody heard of these before? What a godless crowd. The Schofield Reference Bible was the Bible of evangelical and fundamentalist Christianity. It was the Bible that everyone was using. As of 1909, it laid the foundation for modern evangelical Christianity. It was extremely influential because what it was a standard Bible that was thoroughly annotated. Throughout the Bible, it explained, here's what this means. So not only did it give you the words of the Bible, but it told you the accepted, correct way of interpreting them. And this is the foundation for modern American evangelical Christianity. Likewise, Fundamentals. The Fundamentals was a collection of books. It was published in 1910. It's where our fundamentalists get their name. This book was published, The Fundamentals, and it explains exactly what you're supposed to believe. You know, the kind of things he's talked about, they emphasize things like biblical inspiration, inerrancy. It talked about the literal reality of the virgin birth. They talk about the importance of the resurrection in Christian theology. And any of you who are Christians are going to be totally familiar with this. This has been accepted and adopted into mainstream views. That if you are a fundamentalist, you really strongly emphasize the resurrection of Christ. That's the most important event in all of history. The Schofield Reference Bible started the evangelical movement primarily. The Schofield Reference Bible title was something called dispensationalism. It emphasized eschatology. So the modern Christian emphasis among some Christians on the book of Revelation comes out of the Schofield Reference Bible, which tells you how to interpret it. The Left Behind series, all that stuff, that weird stuff. Those guys didn't just invent that. The guys who wrote the Schofield Reference Bible invented that. Well, and some other people before them. But all that myth about vanishing and the disciples and tribulation, all that comes out of the Schofield Reference Bible. Okay, so these guys so White and Price are considered wacky. Schofield Reference Bible, the fundamentals are considered mainstream. And they're rapidly adopted by American Christianity. Now, what happened next was something peculiar. There's another star up there for it, the Scopes trial. The Scopes trial comes along in 1925. It was evolution versus creationism, and it was an interesting result because the evolution side actually lost the trial. We didn't win. This law that restricted the teaching of evolution actually stood, although it was later overthrown on technicality. However, what happened is creationists were humiliated. Literally humiliated. That the reports of the time, the newspapers everywhere, made mock of devout Christians. Made them look extremely silly. H.L. Mencken, for instance, wrote scathing reports of this about the bumpkins coming into Ohio to go to this trial. And it hurt. It stung the creationist movement. And they sort of went into retreat for a little while. It was like they crawled into a cave to lick their wounds and recover from this terrible thing. And there were still conferences going on. They were still getting together and arguing about these things. But they were struggling they're struggling not to reconcile their religion with science, but they're trying to reconcile their religion with the climate of the United States, which considers them crazy fools. Now, that's where George McCready Price comes in. His great strength is he lives forever. They just kept going and going and going. And he was a strong advocate of Ellen White's views. He was a very strong creationist. He said, yes, you're only 6,000 years old. He said, I did some geology and it proves it. And he had these accounts of the flood that explained everything. He was very influential, on a group of other people, John Wickham and Henry Morris in particular, who were mainstream Christians. They had nothing to do with this Ellen White prophecy nonsense. No, good Christians don't believe in that. That's cult thinking. They were mainstream, but they listened to George McCready Price, and they found him convincing on the story of the flood. And they wrote a book called The Genesis Flood in 1961. If you ever run across a copy in a used bookstore, I recommend grabbing it, because this is the founding document of modern American creationism. This is where the story is all laid out. This is where they get explicit in their denial of science and say everything must be interpreted in the light of the Bible. The earth is 6,000 years old. The flood created all of geology. All humans were exterminated in the flood. Only 8 people survived. And they are the founding stock of all modern people. All that turned into the Genesis flood. That became the dogma of American creation. So people like Ken Ham and Kent Hovind, some of you may have heard of these are modern creationists. Ken Ham is in Kentucky. He runs the Creation Museum. Kent Hovind is in jail. Tax evasion. But if you go on YouTube, for instance, you find their videos all over the place. They're extremely influential. These guys explicitly trace all of their ideas directly to that one book, The Genesis Flood. That's what they're pushing. Now, that's just fine. All of a sudden we've got this splinter movement of the creationists that borrows heavily from the Seventh-day Adventists. However, it's been whitewashed through Wickham and Morris and presented as mainstream. Modern creationists will be very upset with you if you try to tell them, oh, you believe in Ellen White's prophecies. No, they don't. But they think that there is science here. As I said, Ken Ham and Ken Hovind sort of take over. They're the big names in the field right now. Even though Ken Ham is in prison, his son still is carrying on his ministry. And then another event happened, a series of events. You see up there, the little stars there. One is the Supreme Court trial, Edwards versus Aguilar, which brought a New Orleans law to the Supreme Court. This is a law that tried to argue that you ought to give equal time to all views on origin. That you ought to teach creation and evolution together in the classroom. That's what they were pushing. It went before the Supreme Court. Creationists were very confident all this was going to sail through. If it were today's Supreme Court, maybe it would. But in 1987, they were more sensible. Supreme Court threw it out. It said, no. It's clear that creationism is religious. Definitely religious. And for that reason, you can't teach that in public schools. You've got to teach only scientific views, secular views, only in public schools. As I said, this is a shock to creationists. They had all these grand plans. They had textbooks all ready to go. They thought, once this trial is over, we're going to get the signals go free. We'll start selling all these creationist textbooks that will sell in schools. The trial went the wrong way for them. They had to regroup. They had to step back and regroup. And what they did is they fell back on this new idea from Philip Johnson. Philip Johnson said, oh, well, we will just invent a creationism that doesn't mention God. We'll say it's a scientific theory, no God involved, just things were created by an unnamed, unspecified designer. That's the ploy. That's what they want to do. It's an interesting tactic. It's been popular for a number of years. It was formulated very clearly in the Wedge document. Search the web for the Wedge document. It's very entertaining. It's their secret plan to take over the American school system, as well as the American government, and replace it with a theocracy. It's their dream. And they're going to do this by concealing all their religious views. That's what they tried to do. That's what they proposed. That's what Phil Johnson proposed. He founded the Intelligent Design Movement, founded the Discovery Institute to promote this. And then in 2005, the Dover trial came along. and they go to trial, so they looked at this and they said, oh, you don't fool me, right? They looked at all the documentation and said, look, all you've done is taken the old creationist literature and done a global search and replace, and you've replaced everything with God with intelligent designer. It's the same thing, just using a different name. And so, intelligent design is now discredited in that approach. It has not succeeded in breaking the public schools. So that's kind of where we're at this point. We've got a large number of people who are promoting young earth creationism. That is, the earth is 6,000 years old. We've still got a few people in discovery who are busy putting up a facade. They're pretending that it's a scientific movement to give cover to some of their efforts. And we're all wrestling with it. We're all struggling with this whole thing. This version of Christianity is very specific. It's not the same as the version in 1900. If you went back to 1900 and talked to the people living in North at that time, even the most devout, pious Christian farmers, all living around here, and you told them what Ken Ham was teaching now, they would say he's nuts. That's anti-Christian. That's irreligious. And they would pull out the Schofield Reference Bible and say, no, this is the way it works. We're not anti-science. We're rational people here. Now, what would they pull out when they pull out the Schofield Reference Bible? They would pull out the Schofield Reference Bible and we'd tell them that, no, this whole business of six-day creation, no, that's not the way it works. The Schofield Reference Bible has this argument. It's called the gap theory. And when you read it, it's kind of artificial and hokey. But what they say is, if you read your book of Genesis, you read Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, and there's a period and a space. And the next sentence says, and the earth was not formed void, darkness upon the face of the deep. They say, that's obvious. Wait, the earth is here. They must have been created sometime before then, right? That's the only way this makes sense. The earth, the void, the deep, all had to have been created sometime before. So they say, in that period space, billions of years happened. The Bible just doesn't talk about them because they're not important. The Bible is about people. It's about God's chosen people. It's about how to live on earth. That whole stuff, just forget it. That's geology. It's not relevant to the Bible. So they just they throw it into this chasm called billions of years. And that's all that stuff happens. In fact, if you read some of the early literature from the Christians at this time, it gets pretty elaborate. Did you know that during these billions of years, that's when Satan rebelled against God, and there was war on the face of the earth, and that's where all these huge geological formations were formed with angels and demons battling it out on the surface of the earth. It's wonderful fantasy stories. It's not anti-Bible. It just says, okay, the Bible doesn't care about it. And so what the Bible is all about is that the Garden of Eden story, the Adam and Eve story, are all about God's covenant with human beings. And that's where the Bible starts. Not with geology. That's not geology's purview. Okay, so that's what they would have said here in Morris 100 years ago. They would have pointed at this is the way it is. Some people would also throw out this theory called the day-age theory. This is also very common. You sometimes hear people say this. And they say, it's God, it's the Bible. When he says a day, that doesn't necessarily mean 24-hour days. It could have been a billion years right there. Day one could have been a billion years. Because God, he's God, right? So that's their argument. And they're saying that, okay, well, all you got to do is take the Bible story and stretch it out, and you can fit it. This is a little diagram from one page that says, well, actually, it doesn't work if you do that, because everything's in the wrong order. I mean, things like creating, that they create fruit trees on day 3, and then the sun comes along on day 4. They're saying that day is a million years. The fruit trees are in trouble. And they're quite right to reject it. This is kind of silly. You still run across lots of people who naively think, oh, this is the explanation. But I think this is symptomatic. This is what people do. Is you have a belief in Christianity, in the Bible, you want to revere this book. Science will tell you, oh, sorry, the evidence goes this other way, the facts are this.
You're trying to figure out, okay, how do these mesh together? How can I do this? Now, they said modern creationists reject all that. They don't try to reconcile. This is a cartoon from Answers in Genesis, and there's our smiling good creationists on the left, and then you say when it says gay, it means gay. Gay, not well, okay, they would say that, but it's just something. Okay, 24 hours. It has to be 24 hours. Answers in Genesis is very worked up about a certain kind of Christian. I've been to their museum, it's kind of amusing. They really don't worry about people like me who happen to be atheists. They don't worry about Jewish people. They don't worry about agnostics. They're very concerned about that guy over there who is a liberal Christian who is willing to say that, okay, gays maybe millions of years, or worse yet, are those Christians who say, well, it's just an allegory of some sort. They're very concerned with those people. So if you happen to be a liberal Christian sitting in this room, you're the enemy to these creationists. An atheist like me, even a militant, nasty new atheist like me, is all over, not to be regarded. We're scum of the earth. As you liberal Christians, you're actively poisoning children's minds with your liberal doctrine. Okay, so where's this going? What has happened in the United States? We've had, like I said, this is since 1961, we've had Genesis Project, the active creationist movement, even before that. If you start looking at the polls since the 1960s, they're very, very depressing. This is the net result here, and this is fairly representative. If you just look at the blue bars for a minute, this is a survey of the general public. What you find is that roughly half the general public will say that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. Everything was literally created in 6 days by God. Think about that. Half the people in the country believe that. Completely contrary to evidence. About 30% have an intermediate view. They say, okay, we believe in science, we understand the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, but I believe in God, and I think God guided us. That He somehow manipulated things, and He shaped us, and He sent us in a particular direction. He used evolution to do that. So it's kind of trying to get it both ways. Only 13% of the general public get the answer right. And that is that God had no part in this process. That human beings evolved over millions of years by this natural mechanism that didn't require desire to manipulate them. Okay, yeah, you can argue with me if you want, if you think my radical atheism is too much for you, but it's pretty much unforgivable at this point in the 21st century to believe that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. That's the problem. Crazy people thinking things like this. Now, what's interesting about the red bars are interesting because that is high school biology teachers. And what you find there is, this terrifies me, 16% of high school biology teachers in this country believe in young Earth creationism. And that may get worse as time goes by. 47% believe in centrists, and interestingly, a lot of your high school biology teachers are atheists. About 28%. But of course they can't say so because it turns out in the United States you can actually get fired from your teaching job if you profess something that's immoral as being an atheist. Anyway, so the big issue here is a lot of people getting it wrong. About half getting it completely dead wrong. Now you might say, okay, well that won't matter to care about evolution. Oh, well, okay, God, here's a study of scientific literacy in from 2008. And the actual whole of basic science questions, things like how fast does sound travel faster than light, and what is that 40% that it does? Something like 33% don't understand if the Earth goes around the sun in a year. 41% think astrology is a reasonable scientific model, and my favorite is number 6. Does not have genes. That's genetically modified on food. That's what that GMO scientist stuff is. They're injecting genes. So we've got this terrible problem. Scientific literacy is low. People believe in things that are completely wrong. what I want to do is talk about how completely wrong they are and show you why they're completely wrong. Okay, another piece of data I want to give you here is there's an imbalance in the country. We've done an analysis of the funding of various agencies, and first I'll show you these creationist agencies. This is all came from their 9 million tax forms that have to disclose their revenues. On the left there, Answers in Genesis, Ken Ham's organization. It is bringing in about $25 million a year. That's its budget, $25 million a year, which is pretty darn impressive. ICR is the Institute for Creation Research. You see there about 8 million. The Discovery Institute, that's an intelligent design organization, they're about 5 million. There's a couple of others on the friends there. Reasons to Believe is an older creationist organization. They fit in with the 1900s style creationism. They believe the Earth is old. They believe it's 4.5 billion years old, except geology. They just reject all of biology and say, no, that couldn't happen. And poof, God, zapped and created it. CFE is Creation Science Evangelism. That is Kent Hogan's organization, which has fallen on hard times since Kent Hogan is in jail. How do you smile like that? Like I said, in jail, they're struggling against, but they're doing fairly well. They're earning a couple $1 million a year. They're doing all right as far as that goes. So we're talking quite a bit of money pouring into creationist propaganda organizations in this country. Now you may ask, what about science education? There must be some science education that's fighting against combating. Yes, there is. It's National Center for Science Education. It's an excellent organization based out of Berkeley, California. Eugene Stockton, who may have heard of her, runs this thing. I really recommend everybody sign up. It's cheap. For $30 a year, you get a newsletter and you contribute to the only major organization that is actively combating creationism. They've also recently added a brief fighting off global warming denialists. So they're of course fighting anti-science, and their budget is about $150 million. We're outgunned. In trouble. We're really getting small here. And that's one of the reasons why we have this big problem. Why scientific literacy is a problem. Okay, so let's talk about the different branches of creationism. I'm just going to talk about two because, like I said, you don't want to hear from thousands of those. I want to talk first about the end of creation, in particular Answers in Genesis. The best funded of the bunch. And then I'll say some things about the Discovery Institute, because the Discovery Institute has become the point man in their legal efforts to get creationism in school. Answers in Genesis approach is really easy to illustrate. They have all kinds of wonderful stuff on the website. They are very geared towards educators. Are there any teachers here? Yeah, you can go to Answers in Genesis and download these magnificent, huge PowerPoint presentations, all done and ready for you. They simplify the whole process. And they're so easy to understand. So for instance, I'm going to show you the entire creation science model in one slide. There it is. That's it. That's it. My students would love me if this was all they had to learn. Memorize the stage, and you're download it. Yeah, it's really. So yeah, we're just taking the literature from the book of Genesis, and that's the thing you have to master. You have to learn this. And they are quite consistent. It is 6 24-hour days. Do not talk to me about millions of years. That's completely false. Also, very handily for me, I do teach the opposition degree, and I teach evolution in my classes. They've got slides for me. Like, here's a complete illustration of everything you need to know about evolution. That's it. That's their part of evolution. They start with a single cell thing, and then they're just fighting, attacking, hitting, crushing, etc., all through there. And then you get up there, and there's Fredson Stone, and I think that's Alex Trebek. And in the mass. I think actually that top diagram, I'm pretty sure that's the origin of Batman. Yes, it all makes sense. I know. That's very right. Because it's very simplistic view of evolutionary theory. No evolutionary biologist would be able to show this without breaking up in class. This is not what we teach at all. It's a more subtle and complex thing than this. And no, it's not just an ascendancy of violence through time. But this is what they do, is they rely on distortions of modern scientific theory. The other thing they do, and this they make a big deal about in the museum, is they present this view. And what this is a cunning approach. What they say is that, oh, we're scientists too. See, we're all creationists and evolutionists alike, looking at the same data set, whether it's dinosaurs, geology, rocks, whatever. We're all looking at the same thing. But you see, evolutionists like me, we're looking at it through the lens of Darwin. We're using this one perspective, and we're not getting a full view. Whereas the creationists are looking at it through the lens of the Bible, right? The Bible informs everything we interpret. And we are interpreting exactly the same evidence, but our view, our creation view is better because we've got the Bible to interpret it. That's their approach. Now, of course, it's a total lie, because what you find when you go to the museum and read the literature is that they basically ignore 99.99% of data. They ignore all the stuff that conflicts and contradicts their views, and they just present little fragments here and there that they can squeeze into their interpretation. That's it. That's their approach. It's extremely dishonest, but they are masters of presenting this as fair play. Well, both sides are doing the same thing this day. We're using the Bible, so we're good people. They're using Darwin. They're Satanists. No, and they only know everywhere that this is their thinking in every area is the Bible. It's all Bible, Bible, Bible. They use the phrase Bible believing over and over again. And I was warning those of you who are not Christians and are not familiar with this, Bible believing is the magic term they use to justify all kinds of very strange, peculiar beliefs. They are saying that they are the only ones who interpret the Bible literally. Think about that phrase for a moment. Interpret literally. They're still interpreting, but they're arguing they're the only ones that have true answer. The Bible believing is code word for I'm going to beat you up if you disagree with me. I'm going to club you with the Bible if you disagree with me. But this is never worth it up in the museum. Like I said, the museum, this is the Creation Museum in Petersburg, Kentucky. I recommend everyone visit. It's like the one in the circus. But this is at the top, and everywhere you left, they've got this message. The other thing, and this is where I want to really slam it to the Christians here in the audience. The other thing you should be aware of is they are hurting you. They are hurting your credibility. Because one of the things that is about the museum is this little stuff. I've lost track of the number of exhibits I saw with this layout. Where it's split into, on one side, you have God's Word. There's a model of evolution, or creation. Is that God created these kinds, and yes, they can diversify into different species within a certain kind, but not, they can't cross species. And over here is the evolutionary story, which is this branching tree of common sin. But notice how they phrase this. On one side is human reason, and the other side is God's Word. This is the message of the modern creationists, is that God's Word, your religion, if you're a Christian, is in opposition to human reason. Human reason is evil. Over and over again, you get this in the literature in the museum. And they make up these ridiculous stories. They're all fitting everything to the Bible. There's another example. In this case, this is another display. It had the same layout. On one side was human reason, a wrong message. It was like, this is their explanation of human evolution. And you'll notice it's kind of peculiar that every other time that God created diversified, it was multiple species. That white marble, that's Noah's flood. So Noah's flood comes along, wipes everything out. Only the ones that are on the ark make it beyond there, and then they branch again. They argue that all of those cool hominid fossils that National Geographic and everything are always throwing in the face, all of those evolved after the flood 4,000 years ago. Every single one of them. And every one of them is a modified ape. So Lucy, famous Australopithecus, that's just another kind of chimpanzee. Neanderthal man, another kind of chimpanzee. They're all apes over there. And humans, pristine and pure, we didn't branch at all. I just are really special. So they made this kind of argument, and I've presented some of this. I sometimes go to scientific meetings, and we want to hear what goes on over there in America, in strange museums, and I tell them about this stuff. And scientists are always quite thrilled with these kinds of diagrams, because they're used to tree diagrams, they're used to looking at these things and analyzing them. Wait a minute, you had that much evolution in 4,000 years? I don't believe evolution is that powerful. But that's what they're arguing for. Okay, so this is the problem, that they're selling Christianity in opposition to reason. We just love that approach. Okay, that's fine with us. Some of you who are believers might find that a little troubling. That this is what's being pushed by half the people in this country now. Also what they do is they throw out all kinds of bizarre explanations and stories. This is a cartoon, you can find it on the web at URL. It's a cartoon titled Darwin Was Wrong, and it's aimed at little kids. And what it purports to show, all the things that Darwin got wrong. And I find it hilarious because every single page of the comic is just everything learned. For instance here, any mathematicians we have at the it said, okay, we've got these blocks of 4 colors. The number of ways you can arrange 4 things is 12. I can tell you mathematicians here. I find this kind of fun. Yes, this is how it works. He's got it wrong. It's a simple combinatorial problem. And it's wrong. Oh, we just read this thing wrong. And then, okay, for the biologist here, they said things done. Darwin did not know about DNA or genes. He didn't know that each species has a set number of genes. I didn't know that either. My biologist knows this. We know for a fact this is false. We are looking at human variation right now, and there's variation in the number of genes in this house. Small variation is true, but all it takes is small variation to form a seed of evolution. And of course, when they take us to, I was totally baffled by this whole page because they're very specifically talking about 4 different colors, and they emphasize 4 so many times. So is this like the nucleotides? I didn't want to mention environment, is that it? No, apparently not. I don't know what they're going at. It doesn't fit, numbers don't fit, everything makes no sense. This is a person who knows nothing about biology or mathematics. Who is lecturing children on biology and mathematics. Okay, now we have this next chart. This is the next page. Here's the little picture. What would evolution what happened? And he's saying, okay, for evolution to happen, we need new information. But instead we see very often, we only see loss, we see corruption. No mutation could ever give rise to any new structures. And yet, if you come to my biology class in the last few weeks, that's precisely what we talked about, actually, how these new features evolved in evolutionary history. If you go to Neil Schuman's talk tomorrow, we'll be talking about that as well. Now here you've got legless fish, and you're bringing up TikTok. It's got legs. Where did it come from? How did it explain to you that there's actually a mechanism there? Again, they're lying here. They never say, okay, for instance, fish have lost their sight. This is actually something that's studied. This is a real cool story. Yes, there are blind cave fish. They live in the dark for a number of generations. They lose their eyesight. They're just falling apart. It turns out when they analyzed the molecular data from these animals, they found it was exactly the opposite. that what was happening is they were overexpressing genes. They were turning on a whole bunch of new genes and suppressing inflammation specifically. What was going on is that in this environment, it wasn't just simply, oh, well, if it becomes no care. It was that you needed new things to survive, and we're dealing with large jaws and large sensory structures in the jaws. And it turns out if you turn on the genes to take bigger jaws, they suppress the eye genes and you get no eyes. So it's exactly the opposite of what they're saying. It's actually the addition of features. It's an extended growth on the jaw and sensory barbels on the jaw. So lots of stories like that. You don't need to put these in there. Lizards are lots of like, you know, okay, where did lizards get their legs in the first place? They come from somewhere, right? And we can tell you about the molecules involved in that process and how those evolve. So you know, they're misleading everybody. And I don't know about you, but I get really upset when people aim at children and telling them lies. But that's what they do. Now, why do they do this? Why are they so committed to these things that are obviously wrong? And the answer is values. That they have deep family values that we can all appreciate. Even a godless, vicious atheist can respect things like the family, can respect things like peace and lack of crime and different things like this. But they argue that these values are peculiar to Christianity. This is another wonderful cartoon from Exodus and Genesis illustrating this. The entire problem with modern society, the foundation is right there. Millions of years. We dare to talk about the earth being millions of years old, and we've got our ardent religious with our canyon development. That leads to pornography, homosexuality, racism, and abortion. I know. You know, one part of me, of course, is I actually don't consider homosexual behavior wrong. So they're kind of right there, yeah, but my view of evolution and color and my view is a human variety. Okay, if you're a homosexual, sure, go ahead. Whatever makes you happy, I don't care. But they present this as Christianity is under attack, and the foundation of Christianity is not Jesus, it is not the redemption of his death, it is 6 days. If you don't believe in 6 days and 6,000 years, now you're not a real Christian. Now, isn't that interesting? This is kind of a reversal of what most Christians would say, the important stuff in their faith. Of course, they haven't answered this problem, and this is their crunching answer. It says, okay, Christians have to aim better. They have to pop balloons, and they have to shoot the foundation, and then all the evolutions will be diving off the castle. Anyway, that's the psychological solution. I don't get it, but okay, here it is. So this is what we're facing right now. There's an active creationism all over the place. Exodus and Genesis is the best subject. Now, what about this intelligent design thing? I want to dismiss intelligent design fairly quickly because I've been talking for a while. This is the definition of intelligent design. It's taken straight from a book called Signature in the Cell, which is the latest hot, boring tone they've come up with. It's gigantic, it's thick, it's horrible. But it's a long book that's started with mission and definition. So they say intelligent design is not a religious-based idea, but instead a evidence-based scientific theory about natural organisms. The second is for political reasons. This is to get it through the courts. That is the sole goal. I should mention that if you do visit places like creationism, and you talk to young creationists, they don't like the intelligent design creationists at all. Why? It's right there. This is an organization that denies God. It's all masked they're putting on, because we actually talk to the people behind the intelligent design movement. They're all fundamentalist Christians, with one exception. They're all very devout in their beliefs. But they will deny God in order to get their views into the public schools. And I will say this, Genesis, they're very upfront and honest about their beliefs. They will not hide what they believe, even if they think it will help them sneak it into school. Okay, so there's a definition. They say, okay, this is how it works. As I said, I read this book. It's called Signature in the Cell. It's 508 pages long, and most of it is Stephen Meyer patting himself on the back and how clever he is. It really is a very narcissistic book, painful to read. But I'm going to summarize it for you, so that you don't have to read it. If you really want to talk to yourself, go ahead. I'm not going to stop you, but I'll be giving the entire argument from Signature himself. And these are actually using his words from the book. His first argument is biology is complex. I would agree. Really complex. Definitely. Yeah, it's complicated. So it's a complicated process. We first have to accept it. Then we say, okay, complexity can only be created by design. That's where it falls apart. That's not true. You can create complexity in all kinds of natural ways. All you need is some kind of artificial mechanism, some kind of mechanism that generates new processes and it will just pile them out and make one more complicated. When you look at actual design work by real engineers, what they spend most of the time doing is trying to simplify design. Yeah, you can come up with a machine that does something very elaborate, it's really complicated and hard, but then the challenge and where you need the money is if you can pare it down to the minimal parts that do the job, you're efficient there. So they're wrong there. But then, of course, the conclusion is therefore biology is created by time. And that's persuasive to some people. All they do is say, okay, accept those first two, and then you guys accept the conclusion. It's just that it's not true. Now, I read the whole book searching for details about this design stuff. And I'm going to show you some excerpts. This is straight from the Steve Myers book. And what I do are a bunch of quotes where he's talking about, okay, what the information certainly originates from thought, which I agree with, and if you write a book, that's conscious thought doing that. Our experience in the world shows that recognized information invariably reflects the prior activity of conscious and intelligent person. He really likes the word invariably. You see all three of these quotes here. So there's no exceptions, which is the lie here, okay? He says, experience shows large amounts of specified complexity or information invariably originates from an intelligent source. Experience teaches whenever large amounts of specified complexity or information are present, invariably creates intelligence play a role. This is his message. He repeats it so many times, over and over and over again. The interesting thing here is those words here, specified complexity. He keeps talking about complexity, specified complexity. He keeps talking about this as something in information theory. So what is specified complexity? Again, I looked over the book, I found the definition. The term specified complexity, therefore, is a synonym for specified information or information content. That's totally meaningless. That explains nothing. I don't understand what complexity is. What is specified mean? But he's using specified again in the definition. Specified is a key thing. Throughout the book, there is no better definition of specified complexity. There are no methods described to measure it. And there's no units mentioned. There are no units mentioned. No sciencey people, you know this, when you're confronted with a formula, you look for the units that help you solve it, break it down. No units anywhere. So how do you measure this? You can't. Well, I've talked to real information theorists, Jeff Shalley, a friend of mine at the University of Waterloo, and he's commented on this. He said, okay, intelligence vibrations, what we call specified information or specified complexity, and implied it is widely accepted by the scientific community. But this is not the case. There is no paper in the scientific literature that gives a rigorous definition of creationist information. Jeff prefers to call specified complexity creationist information. That's really what it is. And it isn't used in any scientific or mathematical investigation. It doesn't exist. This is a made-up term by the creationists. This is a theme in the intelligent design community. They love to invent terms and throw them around. And they are desperately looking for scientific credibility. So fortunately for me, in early February, the Discovery Institute published a complete list of every intelligent design publication ever published. Complete list. Here it is. So that's what I'm open. 70-some articles listed here. That's it. That's the net result from 1984 to 2012. All the publications. And when you look very carefully at these, what you discover is that some of them are legit. There's a couple of nature articles here. There's a couple of there was some published in Field West One, a respectable journal. When we actually looked at those papers on tab, what you discover is that these are papers that sneak in. For instance, one of the Field One is by Douglas Sachs, and what it is a paper in which he describes a computer program being written to recognize Chinese characters. It's legitimate. It's real work. It's real computer science work. But what he's doing is he's drawing this conclusion from it that, oh, well, Chinese characters have meaning, therefore I now have a computer program that can extract meaning out of squiggles on a piece of paper. No, okay. Others are totally bogus, are really bizarre papers in there. For instance, if you could read the tiny print down near the bottom, there are some papers from William Lane Craig, for instance. We may have heard of. He's a Christian debater. He's not a science. But he's got some papers published in the philosophy journal. I'll come back to this in a moment. What I want to do next is, I saw this, okay, there's 1984 to 2012, there's 28 years of creationist publications. And I said, honestly, I can see how long it takes to generate this many papers in scientific literature. And PubMed is, it's a database by NIH, it's emphasized by biomedical research. And I just went to PubMed and said, okay, give me every paper published on the topic of evolutionary biology. And here is the first 70-some. And you might ask, okay, how long did it take for scientists to produce those? That was 2 weeks of output. So we have a little differential in information content here, right? So this is their accomplishment that they're so proud of is kind of pathetic. PubMed doesn't catalog every single paper. They tend to skip things like ecology and stuff like that. They do find good evolutionary biology things. So only a fraction of this stuff. We're just pouring the data out at you people if you have access to it. And you can read all the stuff and it's just totally small. I want to mention one thing that I did notice. I called some of these purple because when I looked at these, what I discovered was something very strange. There's a whole bunch of papers in here that are by a guy named David Abel. David Abel is actually responsible for 16% of the entire scientific output of intelligent design creationism. And I've never heard of it. Haven't you ever heard of him? No, he must be a famous scientist. 16% of the full output right there from David Abel. As I looked up some of those papers, this is one that's in a journal called Life, which is, it turns out, is an extremely crappy journal. It's got a very low impact factor. Hardly anybody publishes in it. There's a whole bunch of crackpot papers in there. It's very poorly read. But here's a paper by David Abel. And the nice thing about it is that this is connected there. He's in the Department of Proto-Biocybernetics and Proto-Biocellulitis at the Origin of Life Science Foundation. Are you dazzled yet? No. All I can say is Division of Science and Math, University of Minnesota Morris. It doesn't sound anywhere as dramatic as the Department of Proto-Biocybernetics. I don't know what that is. And everybody wanted to start on Proto-Biocybernetics. Oh, man. There must be somebody in the English department can explain it in some way. They have to get together to remind me in order to figure out. Well, the key thing about this is it gives you address and everything. And like the true nerd, I plugged his address into Google Maps. Where is the Origins of Life Science Foundation? And it's in Maryland. And it's at the end of a little cul-de-sac in what looked like a very suburban neighborhood. So some friends of mine had driven by and took photographs of the Origins of Life Science Foundation. Here it is. I know you're thinking there must be some mistake. There must be some but if you look there right next to the garage, above the trunk of the car there's a little tiny plaque. Thanks to the magic of computer science, we can zoom in. There it is. It's the original Life Science Foundation in Maryland. It's some guy's house. I kind of think the Department of Total Bioscience, something that window over there. I know you've heard of bioscience in the bathroom. So anyway, this is what design creationism does. They play a game. They try to pretend that they're trying to. Well, you can see this is totally fake. Turns out David Abel is a retired veterinarian. Distinguished career, fine. I respect veterinarians. It's a good work. But he's not qualified to be talking about origins of life. And if you actually read his paper, and he exercises it, you discover there's actually nothing in it. He throws a lot of words around. There's no data, no science, no measurements, no observations. It is just totally bogus verbiage to prove. So this is where we're at. We got government processively patent nonsense, and we've got intelligent design and creationism trying to fly cover for them and pretending to be scientific when they really not. And what do people do? As Josh mentioned last year, they were here. This is Terry Robinson from Answers in Genesis. He came to the University of Minnesota, or not the university, actually came out to the community to talk to people there. He gave 7 lectures, 2 or 3 of them were specifically oriented towards kids. As Josh mentioned, a number of students, some of the people here, attended those lectures, and we were frankly horrified at the non-stop lies coming out of his mouth. The guy knew absolutely nothing about biology. You know, and again, I'm an atheist. Some of you, I'm sure, are Christians. I would think you would feel some shame at this, that this has become the voice of your faith. Is frauds and con men who come in and lie to little children who become to believe in things like the earth is only 6,000 years old. Now, there's some good that's come out of this, obviously, that what this did is motivate our students to get together and work and put together this conference that you're going to be listening to this weekend. I also have to mention that the other thing they did that I greatly appreciate is, for instance, Kelly Cable, who has left the university, graduated, moving on to bigger and greater things, has a webpage, a blog at this URL, and he published his dissection of all of Terry Morrison's claims. It's a really nice article. He goes through all the creationist claims he made one by one and has links to answers to them to show that they're completely wrong. And shortly after he published this, and even now, if you go to Google and you type in Terry Morrison's name, this is the third one that comes up. That's the kind of thing we have to do, is we have to speak up and get our voices out there to let people know that there are good answers to questions you're asking, and people like the ones with answers to Genesis and not giving them. And then, of course, the other big thing is our weekend here. We have these great people. Okay, well, 3 of the 4 are great people. And we're going to be speaking this weekend. Nick Shubin in particular, I'll mention, is speaking tomorrow too, and I want to close with a quote from him. It's a very nice quote. This is from a paper that he wrote with Neil Shubin. This even put together in Sean Carroll, Ecology and Origins of Evolutionary Ecology. And what he says there is that Darwin proved the sin of man, the second greatest work of the Lord. Man still bears in the bottom of the frame the indelible stamp of his lowly origin. These words have never run more true. Researchers now start to appreciate the presence of far more indelible stamps of humanity's lowly mesozoic origins than Darwin could ever imagine. And I believe that's going to be the topic of his talk tomorrow, is showing what are these vestiges, what are these remnants of our lower origins that we find in the human body. So I will leave us there with the promise of great things to come tomorrow. And if you want to ask any questions, feel free to fire away. Go ahead, start the other issues. Yes?
What was the year on that graph of statements of read by biology teachers in America at large?
That was 2008.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the numbers in people have been doing these surveys for about 50 years, and they really haven't wobbled much. They've been pretty constant. About half the American population, Randy Moore at Twin Cities has also done a number of studies of Minnesota school teachers, and this already what he sees is that there's a significant fraction, I think about 1/6 or so, of Minnesota school teachers who violate the rules, the laws of education, and teach both creationism and evolution in class law. So this is still going on. And I believe that here in Washington, you can have a biology teacher who is an open creationist who believes Earth is 6,000 years old and rejects all this stuff.
What can you do as a science teacher in a public school with a colleague like that if they're just teaching creationism?
Kick their ass. No problems. We'll be done. Now, the problem is that administrators aren't answering to the issues. The one thing you can do is Minnesota has very clear science standards. They lay out, and if you're uneducated, you know this. There's a set of things that you are expected to teach in a certain grade in a certain class. And you can hammer them at that. And you can tell them, you are supposed to teach this. You can report them if they're teaching creationism. They are not allowed. No teacher is allowed to teach creationism. That's a religious idea. We had a case here in Minnesota a number of years ago where a school teacher tried to do this. And the school ended up with a lawsuit. The teacher actually was fired from his position. He's now living in Seattle, still teaching creationism, but in a private school, that we can do that. So this can happen. In the case of the Dover trial, in Dover, Pennsylvania, they did this. And there in that school district there, their school district got slammed. They had to pay over $1 million in court costs for this case that they lost it. Now, those of you familiar with Moore's Public Schools, imagine our school district getting hit for $1 million bill. Just suddenly, 1 year, pay out $1 million. On the one hand, we want to fight for good science standards. On the other hand, I just see that. I imagine, that district is devastated at this point. That's a drawback here. But yeah, we have to fight. We have to stand up and fight this. The other thing we should be doing is we should be recruiting parents to cooperate. One of our big problems in this whole movement is that if a teacher brings up evolution in the classroom, he or she can pretty much count that parents are going to come in screaming, "Don't poison my child blind with the students." He'll get a lot of flack for it, right? If you teach evolution in the classroom, how many people here have kids who've been taught evolution and you're going to tell a teacher, "Good job"? That doesn't happen very much. There are not very many good rewards for this. So one thing parents should be doing is we should be supporting our good teachers and saying, yes, students that you're teaching this stuff, keep teaching this stuff, keep challenging the students with the facts and the reality and stuff that they need in order to succeed when they go to an elite institution like the University of Minnesota wants. Because that's in biology here, first semester, that's what they get is solid a couple of weeks of nothing but evolution. You better be prepared. So yeah, parents support teachers, teachers support their teaching, hammer the administrators, tell them to support you with us, and point to the speech science standards in the law and say, yeah, this is what we're supposed to teach. Thanks. See, there's a question back there. Is there? Yes.
Just wondering if there's ever been something done with this was U.S. U.S. compared with.
Yes, there has. And when I travel internationally, I was making a point to bring this up. I didn't put the slide in here, sorry. When you go to every other country, it's so much better than here. Canada is something like 65 to 70% of the Canadian population support good science teaching. there's still a number who, I mean, it's not like it's 90% or 95%, well, it should be 100%, but, it's up there. In the United Kingdom, they're even better. Richard Dawkins recently had a survey done, and it was aimed at religion, and they discovered that only 50% of people in the United Kingdom now profess any religion at all. Half are agnostics and atheists. And when you look at the people who do profess a religion and say, I'm a Christian, it's something like only 16% believe in this Jesus guy. So, it is possible to get to a state where our societies are fairly rational. Also, there are places like Scandinavia, Denmark, Sweden, Norway. Oh man, there's no issue there at all. It's all through science. Religion for them is something that's doing when you marry into a funeral, is to the church. Otherwise, no, you've got better things to do on a Sunday morning. Football. Real football, the round ball. Okay, other questions? Yes.
You briefly mentioned private schools. I've been to a couple private schools and academic tournaments. Private high school, I saw, among other things, a brochure explicitly attacking stem cell research and other things too horrible to be described in a polite public setting.
Right.
How do you think we should respond to this as those of us who support evolution?
How do you think we should respond to this? Liberty or impose truth on people. If you're going to a private school in this country, there are no restrictions. That you cannot tell people in private school that they cannot teach creationism, that they must teach this. The only pressure we have is by way of standards and accreditation. That if you go to a private school that teaches nothing but creationism, you may have a harder time getting into the University of Minnesota Morris, because we'll look at that. We'll say this student is not prepared. But otherwise, that's their right. If you do that, you're willing to pay good money to put kids in the private school, and you can have them teach some animal bullshit you want. That's the way it works. Sorry to say. It's just that what we're actually trying to protect is the public educational system, which is strictly secular. Yes.
Just to follow up on that, another issue to get careful about though, there are a lot of people who like to see public money moved away from public schools into the funding of private schools.
Yes.
Where there has been, as you say, no restrictions on what can and can't be taught. So I think there is an opportunity to fight back in that context.
Right.
Public money in the public schools.
Right. There are political things you should be doing, and that is, shoot down any of these arbitrary laws, support public schools. Yes, when those levies come through at election time, vote to give the schools some money. They need it to do a good job of educating. So yeah, that's all true. There's things we can do. Other things I kind of mentioned this to you is just because somebody went to private school doesn't mean you get a crap education. Our private schools do an excellent job, and some of them are even religious schools. Catholic schools, for instance, have a pretty good reputation for churning out students who have a good background in science. So they don't cut corners there. They still tell them, God did his magic thing, put a soul in the human at some point, but they fully accept the general theory of evolution, the natural part of it. Yes?
It seems like last century there was a big push for science teaching. We had made the atomic bomb, we had all sorts of vaccines come out. And as soon as we hit this century, everything just seemed to hit a wall and almost stop, if not go backwards. At the same time, we've seen a big influx of religious influence. How do we curb that? How do we get back to our roots? And they were highly religious back then as well.
How do we curb that? One way it happened was in the 60s, what happened was the space race, which was extremely important because suddenly we had a competitor, and we realized that we had to maintain a technological edge to keep up with the Soviet Union. And so there was this brief shining moment when the federal government was setting standards, when they were supporting the production of high-quality textbooks, when they were encouraging states to adopt these textbooks. There was this whole program called BCS ECFC, which I've been at probably because of this great biology program at the Institute, just like it elementary school. It's terrific. Good books. So that's one thing that happened. What's happened since is there's been a corruption of the textbook process. Have you heard of the Texas Board of Education? Yes, Nick, you're ashamed. It's your home state. Oh, okay.
I apologize.
We'll make it right. Yes, Texas has an undue influence on our textbooks in this country. Because they're the largest unified textbook market. California is larger, but it's not uniform. Individual districts can pick their own books within those selection. Texas says, okay, every school in Texas takes these books. And so there's this choke point where the creationists are very active. They have packed the school boards there. And what they do is limit what books are available. And the books that come through there tend to be gutted of the evolution. So the kind of thing you have to do to fight that is we need more smart liberal people running for school boards. Yeah, they're boring and they're hard work, but it's important work. This is where we try to get our influence felt. So we need more of that, we need more activism at the grassroots to do this. We also need people to be aware of the problem. I will recommend a book highly that I just read a few weeks ago, Catholic Stewart's The Good News Club. Anybody heard of it? No. Oh man, read this book. It's terrifying. The Good News Club is about the efforts of evangelical organizations to subvert the public school system by having these so-called after-school or lunch-hour clubs that are housed in the school building. And what they are is straight evangelical Christianity. And what they do is they get the kids in there and they will first tell kids, oh, you don't believe in my version of Christianity? You should tell your parents they're going to hell. Literally, they do this. We tell kids there is one pure version of Christianity. And it is fundamentalist evangelical Christianity where Parsons strike. So the Catholics are all going to hell. And they tell them this to school and the kids crying because their grandpa's going to burn forever eternity to lake of fire and things like this. Their whole goal is to subvert the school system and corrupt it so much that nobody wants to spend money at public schools anymore. They have explicitly stated this is the goal, is the destruction of the public education system in this country. So we have to do whatever we can to protect it. Anyway, Catholic Stewart, Good News Club, it's a terrifying book. But really good. If you like magazines, but other questions? Or shall we let people go? No. Yes, that's you.
Given the neat little diagram in which the creationists happen to have translated competition and violence, I was curious, what are some typical creationist responses to symbiosis and biology at the cellular level and cyanobacteria and relationships that very clearly demonstrate coevolution and those types of patterns?
Okay, I'm pretending to be a creationist right now and I'm listening to you understand. Huh? That's one comprehension is the first response. Second response is denial. None of that's true. How can you argue for symbiosis? God created things like this. Since the in the Bible, God created flowering plants. So of course they have chloroplasts. Just proof like that. You expect a sophisticated argument? They will not make a sophisticated argument. There isn't one. They're pretty much in complete denial of everything in science that you have learned in your biology classes, in your physics classes, in your geology classes. Surprisingly, you will find many creationists who actually argue against math. I know. Another book I just finished was Jason Rosenhaus. I'm trying to remember. He's a mathematician and he visits these creationist conferences. And one of the points of conflict is satanic math. Algebra, calculus, all that stuff. You don't need to know that. Math, arithmetic is big enough to know.
That's a human.
Yeah, what is a human? Okay, yeah. One more question. Anyone? No one got a question? Are we done? Oh, okay.
One more question. You were talking earlier about kids being made fun of in school. That happened to me a lot, also in elementary and high school. Now that I'm out, what can I do to stop this sort of activity?
You haven't learned yet that there is now rule the world? I mean, you take satisfaction in this, that's the thing, you're educated, you're smart, you know a lot of things, you're going to be successful in your career, whatever it may be, right? Yeah, okay. What are you worried about? That's the goal we want. And then that's the thing, this is another thing about schools, as many of you know, as many of you experience, that you are one of the scholarly geeks in school. If you're not a jock, if you're not the gorgeous girl in public school, you will get lost more socially. It's a universal experience. Many of us have had that experience by it. And some of us, you do just fine. We marry the beauty queen, right? And we do really well. So that's where you find your satisfaction, is do it right now. Okay, with that,
One more round of applause to Dr. Myers.